Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Sunday, the 6th day of Nisan. Nisan is the month of miracles, and we need to give thanks to Hashem for the unbelievable miracles. What we see this today, yesterday, with the hundreds of missiles that came from Iran, and how it, Baruch Hashem, there was very minimal damage. Of course, we need to pray for Hashem to protect us and to eliminate the enemies in a miraculous way. But yes, people say, oh, how wonderful the technology they have, the defensive technology. But we know that it's really the miracle of Hashem. Hashem helps us. Hashem protects us. And it's all, Hashem is waiting for us to see this. And it's interesting that in today's Tanya, we're going to learn something also, where the Alter Rebbe tells us how we have the power to sweeten harsh judgment. That sometimes things comes down from Hashem, which seems to be like judgment, severities, things that are not good. We have the power to transform them into good. How do we do it? Let's talk about it. Let's begin with tzedakah. Tzedakah shemekareves esagula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. So, we learned yesterday about the mitzvahs and the Torah that we study, and we do it with lishma, with the kavanah, with the intent, with the feeling and emotions. It goes up to the higher spiritual worlds and connects. The Torah connects with the spiritual, the sphere is the godliness of the worlds. And today, the Alter Rebbe, we learned today a side note that the Alter Rebbe wrote in this chapter 40. And in this side note, the Alter Rebbe explains what happens once this Torah goes up to this spiritual world and unites with the spheres, with the highest spheres. What happens then? Says the Alter Rebbe that it enables the union, the unity, and the inclusion of the different attributes together. And thereby, it enables to sweeten the judgment. What does that mean? To explain in simple words, it's a very deep concept, but we'll try to explain it in as simple as we can. Take, for example, when you have a king that has different ministers of different departments. The king has a goal to run a country, to run it in a proper, kind, benevolent way. Now, in order to do that, he has different types of different departments and different ministers. The Minister of Finance, in charge of the money, make sure that nothing is wasted. He has the Minister of Housing, he has the Minister of the Police Minister, and everyone has their agenda, and they're focusing on their agenda. And sometimes their agendas do not match. They can clash. The Minister of Finance wants to reduce the spending, and the Minister of Housing wants to spend for the people who don't have, or similarly. But then, when they all come to the king, they realize that they're only serving the king's will. And ultimately, the king's will is something which is above all of them. And therefore, they join together to fulfill the king's will. So when we're talking about Hashem's will that came down in forms, Hashem reduced his light, his energy, his will to come down in forms of the intellectual attributes and emotive attributes. And in the emotive attributes, you have starts with chesed, kindness. Kindness is about giving. Then you have the second attributes from the left side is gevura, which means judgment, restricting. Now those attributes seem different when they're serving as their individual attributes. But when they are included in the higher will of God Himself, they all become one. They all become nullified into the higher will. And when we're talking about the higher will, what is revealed? The attribute of kindness is more revealed, because the attribute of kindness is about the giver who wants to give with no limits. And the gevura, the judgment, is only there to restrict, so the recipient is not overwhelmed and overpowered with too much giving that can corrupt them. But ultimately, when we reach to the highest place of Hashem, the roots of the judgment is revealed, of it, the true purpose of the root of the judgment is revealed, and that is ultimately the kindness of Hashem. So when we reach to that level, when we elevate the Torah and the mitzvahs to that level, that triggers a eis rotzen, a time of the will of Hashem, and the will of Hashem overpowers everything. And therefore, the judgment is being sweetened by the kindness of Hashem. And as a result, it trickles down to our world, that things become, in a revealed way, a kindness. And we should be able to see the kindness. And again, that is done through our Torah mitzvahs, and specifically when we do it in the feelings and emotions, connecting to Hashem, doing it for Hashem's, to fulfill Hashem's desire, and so on. So let's see inside what the Alter Rebbe says. There's the Alter Rebbe, V'sham meir u'mizgale gam ken hayichud ha'elyon ha'nase b'kol mitzvah v'talmud Torah. And there, in the higher worlds, there also shines forth and is revealed the supernal union affected by every mitzvah and by Torah study. Shehu yichud midosav yisbarach, namely the union of God's midot, God's attributes, emotive attributes. Shenichlalois zu bezu. These midot fuse with each other. Venim tokais agvuros b'chasadim, and the gevuros, the attributes of severity, are sweetened by chasadim, the attributes of kindness. How? Al yedei eis ratzon ha'elyon ein sof baruch hu, hameir u'mizgale b'bchinas gilui rav ve'otzim. This is through the hour of will, of favor, of the blessed Ein Sof, meaning the revelation of the will of Ein Sof, which shines forth and reveals itself in abundance and intense revelation. So because the Torah mitzvahs are the actual will of Hashem, unlike the attributes are for the godliness that is reduced to become attributes. Will, just like attributes, you have the intellectual attributes and you have the emotive attributes, just like when you see by a human being. You have a person, a human being has his intellect, has his emotions, and he has his will. Which one is greater? The will power is stronger than everything else. It can change the nature of the intellect even. If you want something, if you have a desire to something, you're going to find a way of understanding that whatever you want is the right thing to do. And the same thing with the emotions, of course. So when the will is revealed, this is just to use the example of a human being. God created us in His image. So we're using the example of a human being. Now we're talking about God's will, and God's will, which is the Torah and the mitzvahs, when this is revealed, it has the ability to fuse in the emotive attributes the greater light of Hashem. How is this revealed in this great revelation? Again, through the hour of will, the favor of blessed Ein Sof, meaning the revelation of the will of the Ein Sof, which shines forth and reveals itself in abundant and intense revelation by a reason of the arousal of man below, consisting of the performance of a mitzvah or occupation in Torah in which the supernal will of the blessed Ein Sof is clothed. Meaning, you do a mitzvah that you're fulfilling God's will. You study Torah, not only you're fulfilling God's will, you're actually uniting with God's will itself. Because Torah is God's will. God's will is expressed in the laws of the Torah. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, if you remember, we learned that the Torah that we study, the mitzvahs that we do, rises up to the higher worlds, the worlds of Beriah, the intellectual world, in the Sephiris, the godly attributes of this world. And now we understand that in these godly attributes, we add the infusion of the godly light, which is the will of Hashem, which is higher than the attributes, which causes them to unite and to sweeten the judgment. Continues now, the Alter Rebbe says that although we reach only to certain levels, the world of Beriah, the world of Yetzirah, but ultimately the true union of the true union and the unity of these attributes happen mainly in the world of Atzilus. Atzilus is the highest spiritual world where we cannot reach. That is the more godliness is revealed, obviously the more united they are, the more one they become. So the ultimate union happens in the world of Atzilus. We cannot reach this, so how do we affect there? So that's the Alter Rebbe is going to explain. But the main unity caused by Torah and mitzvahs takes place far higher in the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. Shesham hu meus ve'atzmas midosav isbarich miyuchodes b'ma'atzilon ein sof bochu, where the core and essence of God's midas are united with their emanator, Ein Sof, blessed be He. And there is found the core and essence of the supernal will of the blessed Ein Sof, the blessed Hashem, the godliness of Hashem. And in the lower worlds, there's only a ray, a glimmer, radiance from the light that is in Atzilus shines in the lower worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Ve'arasan levad which a mere glimmer radiates in the world of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, in each of these worlds according to its rank. Now, says the Alter Rebbe, the question is, but we say that the main union happens in the world of Atzilus, but we don't reach there. Our souls are lower level souls. Yes, they are unique souls of holy tzaddikim, that their soul comes from that world of Atzilus, but the vast majority of us are not from that place. That's the question. Now, although the soul of the person engaging in this Torah study or mitzvah does not stem from Atzilus, nevertheless, as the Alter Rebbe, even though our soul is not from there, but the Torah itself, the will of Hashem that is invested in the words of Torah, this is godliness and one thing with Hashem. So the Torah that we study does connect to that world of Atzilus. Nevertheless, he is able to affect unity in the midst of Atzilus. In the highest world, we're able to affect the unity of the emotive attributes. Why? Because the supernal will, which is clothed in this mitzvah, and in the case of Torah, it is merely clothed in it. The contrary. In the case of Torah, it is not merely clothed in it, but furthermore, it is indeed the very halacha in the Torah that he is studying. The mitzvah, it is the will of Hashem, is clothed in the mitzvah. That's when you do fulfill the mitzvah, you actually fulfill Hashem's will. But the Torah is God's will itself. The laws of Torah is the will of God. So therefore, it says, "Hu elikusei v'eirin seif hamatzil baruch hu, she'u hu retzeinei echad," this eternal will of godliness, and is the Ein Sof light of the emanator of the Sephiros of Atzilus, since he and his will are one. That's something we explain many times. Shem and his will are one. It's not like humans. And this supernal will is actually the source of the midas, the motive attributes, since it was by his will that he emanated his midas, which are united with himself. So now, when we reveal that will of Hashem by studying Torah and doing this mitzvahs, we infuse a greater light in these attributes more than they have themselves. Therefore, by means of the revelation of his will, caused by one's engaging in Torah or in a particular mitzvah, the midas fuse with each other. Because again, why do they fuse with each other? Because once the source is revealed, they become nullified to their source. They realize that they are midas of the Almighty, which is the root of all of them. And then what happens when imtakis agvuros b'chasadim be'eis ratzenzu? And the gevuras are sweetened by the chasadim, the judgment are sweetened by the kindness at this hour of revealed favorable will. That is a beautiful lesson to us. And when we do a mitzvah, when we study Torah, and especially when we study them and we do the mitzvahs with the feeling and emotions, we bring them up to the highest levels, and there what happens is that it fuses with each other and it reveals the source and the godly light, which in turn sweetens the judgment. So that's why, especially in a time when we see judgment around us, we see wars and we see diseases, unfortunately, and we see all kinds of judgments. Our job is to sweeten the judgments, and that is by increasing and doing more mitzvahs and more mitzvahs, especially now Pesach comes. Make sure to give matzah, shmura matzah, as the Rebbe said, to as many Jews as possible to eat the shmura, handmade matzah, on the Passover night. To make sure to sell the chametz. We shouldn't have chametz, to clean from the chametz, and to add in tzedakah, everything what we do in order to sweeten the judgment. And ultimately, that will be the greatest miracle, the revelation, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu very soon. On a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem.